Our planet, a sphere of brilliant blue suspended in the vast, silent dark of space, is defined by its water. Oceans, seas, and great rivers cover more than 70% of its surface, a liquid kingdom of immense power and profound mystery. For millennia, humanity has been drawn to these waters, compelled by a primal urge to explore, to trade, to connect distant shores. We have built vessels of ever-increasing ambition, from humble rafts of woven reeds to colossal cities of steel, each one a testament to our ingenuity and our desire to master this vast, untamed wilderness. But the sea is not a realm to be conquered. It is a force of nature, ancient and indifferent, and it keeps its own counsel. In this series, we embark on a solemn journey into the heart of the abyss, not to marvel at its vibrant life, but to bear witness to moments when humanity's grand designs met with the ocean's unforgiving reality. We will explore the stories of the greatest maritime disasters in recorded history. Events of such catastrophic scale, they have been etched forever into our collective memory. These are not mere tales of wood and metal succumbing to the waves. They are deeply human tragedies, stories of hope turning to despair, of ordinary journeys ending in extraordinary catastrophe, and of the immense, humbling power of the natural world. Each disaster we examine is a unique confluence of circumstances, a perfect storm of human error, mechanical failure, and the sheer unpredictable force of the elements. We will travel back in time from the frigid expanse of the North Atlantic to the warm, crowded waters of the Philippines, from the muddy currents of a great American river to the stormy heart of the Baltic Sea. We will dissect the chain of events, moment by fateful moment, to understand not just what happened, but why. We will uncover the stories of those aboard, the context of their time, and the enduring legacies these tragedies have left behind. Prepare to venture into the deep, to confront the moments when the sea claimed its due. This is a chronicle of ambition and tragedy, of innovation and hubris. A generative documentary charting the 10 deadliest maritime disasters ever recorded. Our journey begins not with the most famous, but with the raw, untamed power that underpins every one of these stories, the vast, unpredictable, and ultimately sovereign sea. It is a world of breathtaking beauty, but also of terrifying power, a power that demands respect, for when it is challenged, the consequences can be devastating. In the early years of the 20th century, a new age of technological marvels was dawning. Humanity, filled with an unshakable confidence, believed it was on the cusp of mastering the natural world, and no single creation better embodied this spirit of boundless optimism than the Royal Mail ship Titanic. She was more than a vessel. She was a floating palace, the largest and most luxurious moving object ever created by human hands. Her very name spoke of immense power and scale, a titan of the seas designed not merely to cross the ocean, but to dominate it in unparalleled comfort and style, a true testament to the industrial might of the age. From the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, she emerged like a leviathan, a vision of pristine white and polished brass. Her design was a symphony of superlatives. 16 watertight compartments, sealed by automated doors, gave her the reputation of being practically unsinkable, a phrase that would echo through history with haunting irony. On board, her interiors rivaled the grandest hotels of Europe, lavish suites, a grand staircase crowned by a glass dome, swimming pools, and Turkish baths catered to the wealthiest industrialists and aristocrats of the era. For these passengers, the Titanic was not just transport. It was the ultimate symbol of their status and the perceived invincibility of their modern world. But the Titanic was also a vessel of hope for many others. Deep within her hull, far from the opulent dining rooms and gilded promenades, were the third-class accommodations. Here, hundreds of immigrants from across Europe were making a pilgrimage to the New World, carrying with them all their worldly possessions and the dream of a better life in America. For them, the Titanic was a colossal ferry to the future, a promise of opportunity. The ship was a microcosm of the rigid social structures of its time, with the hopes of the poor providing the unseen foundation upon which the luxury of the wealthy floated. On the 10th of April, 1912, under the command of the veteran Captain Edward Smith, the Titanic set sail from Southampton on her maiden voyage. The sense of occasion was palpable. Crowds cheered from the docks, waving farewell to a ship that represented the pinnacle of human achievement. As she steamed out into the English Channel, powerful and serene, no one among her 2,240 passengers and crew could have possibly conceived of the fate that awaited them. They were aboard the unsinkable ship on a routine journey across an ocean that for now lay as calm as glass, utterly unaware of the ancient, frozen threat drifting silently towards their path. We move now from the icy chill of the North Atlantic to the tropical warmth of the Philippine archipelago. Here, in December 1987, the sea is not a barrier, but a lifeline, a network of highways connecting thousands of islands. For countless Filipinos, inter-island ferries are the primary and often only means of transport. During the Christmas season, this maritime traffic reaches a fever pitch. Families separated by work and distance throughout the year embark on a great annual exodus, traveling from the bustling cities back to their home provinces to celebrate the holidays. The atmosphere on these journeys is typically one of festive anticipation and joyous reunion. The MV Dona Paz was one such vessel, a passenger ferry that had been plying these waters for years. Originally built in Japan as the Himeyuri Maru, she was now old and had been extensively modified, with extra tiers of bunks welded onto her decks to maximize passenger capacity. On December 20th, 1987, she departed from the island of Leyte, bound for the capital, Manila. Officially, her manifest listed 1,583 passengers and crew. But this number was a catastrophic fiction. In the chaotic, loosely regulated world of holiday travel, it was common practice for tickets to be sold illegally at the docks with no record kept. The true number of souls aboard was far, far higher. Packed into every conceivable space, from the crowded dormitories to the open-air decks and corridors, were men, women, and a great many children. Estimates would later suggest that more than 4,000 people were crammed onto a vessel designed for a fraction of that number. They slept on floors, shared cramped bunks, and stood in passageways, all bound together by the shared purpose of reaching home for Christmas. The ship was a floating, dangerously overcrowded tinderbox, a disaster waiting for a spark. The night was clear, the sea was calm, and for the passengers the only concern was the long but familiar journey ahead. As the Dona Paz sailed through the Tabla Strait, a busy shipping lane south of Manila, most of her passengers were asleep. The festive mood had given way to the quiet hum of the engines and the gentle rocking of the ship. On the bridge, the command structure was tragically lax. It's believed the ship's captain was watching a movie in his cabin, and that perhaps only an apprentice or an unqualified seaman was at the helm. This vessel, carrying the lives and dreams of thousands, was steaming through a congested waterway with a skeleton crew in charge, its radar reportedly not even functional. The stage was set for a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. At approximately 10:30 in the evening, in the darkness of the Tabla Strait, the Dona Paz was on a collision course with another vessel. The MT Vector was an oil tanker, much smaller than the ferry but carrying a deadly cargo, 8,800 US barrels, over 1 million liters of gasoline and other petroleum products. The Vector was also operating under a cloud of illegality. It was later found to be sailing without a license, without a qualified lookout, and with a questionable certificate of seaworthiness. Two vessels, both operating with a shocking disregard for basic safety protocols, were now converging in the dark. their fates about to become violently and irrevocably intertwined. The moment of impact was catastrophic. The much larger Dona Paz plowed into the port side of the tanker, the force of the collision ripping open the Vector's hull as if it were a tin can. There was no time to react, no warning alarm. For the sleeping passengers on the ferry, the world was instantly transformed into a scene of violent chaos. The grinding crash was immediately followed by a monumental explosion as the Vector's highly volatile cargo ignited. A colossal fireball erupted, engulfing both ships in a maelstrom of flame. The gasoline, now a river of fire, spilled out across the surface of the sea. The fire spread with terrifying, almost supernatural speed. The inferno leapt from the tanker to the ferry, consuming the overcrowded decks in seconds. The very air seemed to ignite. The Dona Paz, with its wooden-tiered bunks and flammable cargo, became an instant furnace. The lights on the ship went out, plunging the interior into a terrifying chaos of smoke, heat, and darkness, punctuated only by the roaring flames. Panic erupted as thousands of people, suddenly awakened into a living hell, scrambled desperately for a way out, their path illuminated by the very fire that was consuming them. There was no time for an organized evacuation, no alarm, no instructions from the crew, many of whom were likely among the first to perish. The life jackets were reportedly locked away, inaccessible to the terrified passengers. The choice they faced was impossibly grim: to be burned alive on the ship or to jump into a sea that was itself on fire. The gasoline, lighter than water, had created a burning slick that surrounded the stricken vessels for hundreds of meters in every direction, turning the ocean itself into a trap. It was a scenario for which there could be no survival plan. The year is 1865. The great American Civil War, a conflict that has torn a nation asunder, is finally drawing to a close. Here on the mighty Mississippi River, an artery of commerce and life for a continent, a different kind of drama is about to unfold. This is not a story of the open ocean, of vast, salty expanses, but of a river's powerful current and the immense pressure of human desperation. The waters, brown and swirling with the silt of 1,000 miles, carry with them the hopes of thousands of men, Union soldiers recently released from the horrors of Confederate prison camps like Cahaba and Andersonville, yearning for home. These men, emaciated and weakened by disease and starvation, see the river as their final passage from the darkness of war to the light of peace. Their journey north is a pilgrimage, a return to families who have prayed for this very moment. The vessel tasked with this sacred duty is the SS Sultana, a magnificent side-wheel steamboat. She's a common sight on these waters, but on this fateful day, destined for infamy. She is a vessel of wood and iron, powered by steam and fire, designed for the river's unique challenges, but not for the immense burden she is about to bear. The atmosphere in Vicksburg, Mississippi is one of chaotic relief and anxious anticipation. The wharves are crowded, a sea of blue uniforms, a testament to the sheer scale of the war's end. For these soldiers, the sight of the Sultana, with its tall smokestacks and churning paddle wheels, is a symbol of salvation. They are promised passage, a swift journey upriver to Cairo, Illinois, and from there a train ride home. The government, eager to repatriate its soldiers, offers transportation companies a handsome fee, $5 per enlisted man and $10 per officer. This financial incentive would prove to be a fatal catalyst. The Sultana herself was a relatively new vessel, built only 2 years prior in Cincinnati. She was a marvel of her time, 260 feet long, a workhorse of the Mississippi trade, regularly plying the route between St. Louis and New Orleans. Her legal carrying capacity was clearly defined, 376 passengers and crew. But the laws of man are often bent and sometimes broken by the pressures of greed and circumstance. The promise of government payment created a fierce competition among steamboat captains, a race to carry as many soldiers as possible, a race that would tragically compromise every principle of maritime safety. The captain of the Sultana, J. Cass Mason, a man with a stake in the vessel's ownership, saw an opportunity for a massive payday. He was aware of a critical issue with one of the ship's 4 boilers. A bulge had been discovered, a dangerous weakness in the metal skin containing the immense pressure of the steam. A proper repair would take days, time that would allow other boats to claim the lucrative human cargo waiting on the docks. Instead of undertaking a thorough replacement, a hasty and inadequate patch was applied. A thin sheet of metal riveted over the weakened area, a temporary fix for a potentially catastrophic problem. This decision, born of financial expediency, sealed the fate of the ship and the men who would soon board her. It was a secret held within the iron heart of the vessel, a ticking time bomb hidden from the weary eyes of the soldiers who saw only a vessel of hope. They knew nothing of the compromised boiler, the patched-over weakness that strained under the immense pressure required to push a heavily laden boat against the powerful current of a river swollen with spring meltwater. The stage was set for a disaster of unimaginable proportions, on a river that had, until now, been a symbol of life and connection. The soldiers, many too weak to even walk without assistance, were herded aboard. They filled every available space, cramming onto the main deck, the hurricane deck, the boiler deck, even finding precarious perches on the roof of the pilot house. The ship, designed for fewer than 400 souls, groaned under the weight of more than 2,100 people. It was a vessel transformed into a floating tinderbox, dangerously top-heavy and packed far beyond any reasonable limit. The Sultana, now listing heavily, was a disaster waiting to happen, a floating monument to avarice and neglect. In 2002, the MV Le Joula was the lifeline between Casamance and Dakar, Senegal's capital. The ferry was more than a ship. It was a symbol of hope, connection, and daily life for thousands. After a year of repairs, the Le Joula returned to service, greeted by crowds desperate to travel. On September 26th, the ship left Ziguinchor, carrying over 1,800 people, more than 3 times its legal limit. The decks were packed with passengers and cargo, dangerously overloading the vessel. That night, a storm struck as the ferry sailed into open water. Fierce winds and waves battered the top-heavy ship. In minutes, the Le Joula capsized, trapping nearly everyone inside. Only a handful survived, clinging to the overturned hull in the darkness. The sea had claimed the Le Joula, and the silence that followed was as haunting as the tragedy itself. We turn our attention now to the North Atlantic, in the year 1915. The world is in the grip of the First World War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality that is reshaping the very nature of warfare. On the seas, a new and terrifying weapon has emerged, the German U-boat or submarine. These underwater predators are changing the rules of naval engagement, bringing the war to the commercial shipping lanes that are the lifeblood of Great Britain. It is in this tense and dangerous environment that our story begins. At the center of this story is a ship that was the pride of the British merchant marine, the RMS Lusitania. Launched in 1906, she and her sister ship, the Mauretania, were marvels of their age. They were the largest, fastest, and most luxurious ocean liners in the world. With her elegant lines, 4 iconic funnels, and powerful turbine engines, the Lusitania was a symbol of Edwardian technological prowess and imperial confidence. She was known as the Greyhound of the Seas, capable of crossing the Atlantic in under 5 days. The Lusitania was operated by the Cunard Line, a direct competitor to the White Star Line and its famous vessel, the Titanic. In the wake of the Titanic disaster 3 years earlier, the Lusitania had been fitted with additional lifeboats, more than enough for every soul on board. She was considered not only fast, but safe. Her speed, it was argued, was her greatest defense. The prevailing wisdom at the British Admiralty and Cunard was that no submarine could possibly catch and successfully attack a vessel capable of steaming at over 25 knots. However, the Lusitania was not merely a passenger liner. Her construction had been subsidized by the British government with the explicit understanding that she could be requisitioned for service as an armed merchant cruiser in the event of war. Her designs included reinforced decks for mounting guns and internal layouts that could be converted for military use. While the guns were never fitted, she was officially listed as an auxiliary warship, a fact that would have profound and tragic consequences for her and her civilian passengers. In early 1915, the war at sea escalated dramatically. Germany, in response to a crippling British naval blockade, declared the waters around the British Isles a war zone. They announced a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, stating that any Allied ship, naval or merchant, found in this zone would be sunk without warning. To make their intentions clear, the German embassy in Washington, D.C. placed a newspaper advertisement right next to the sailing notice for the Lusitania's upcoming voyage. It was a stark and direct warning to all passengers. The warning was explicit. Travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists and that vessels flying the flag of Great Britain or of any of her allies are liable to destruction. Travelers sailing in the war zone on ships of Great Britain or her allies do so at their own risk. Despite this chilling notice, the Lusitania prepared to sail from New York on May 1st, 1915. Confidence in the ship's speed and safety remained high. The warning was dismissed by many passengers and the ship's captain as a mere scare tactic. The ship was carrying 1,266 passengers, including a significant number of Americans, and a crew of 702. In her cargo hold, alongside regular mail and parcels, was a controversial shipment. She was carrying thousands of cases of rifle cartridges and non-explosive artillery shell fuses classified as small arms ammunition. This cargo, while not technically violating the then neutral United States rules of transport, further blurred the line between her status as a civilian passenger liner and a legitimate military target in the eyes of the German High Command. As the Lusitania steamed eastward across the Atlantic, her fate was converging with that of a silent hunter lurking beneath the waves. This was the German U-boat U-20, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Walter Schwieger. The U-20 was on patrol in the designated war zone off the southern coast of Ireland, an area that had become known as U-boat Alley. Schwieger was an experienced and successful submarine commander, and in the days leading up to his encounter with the Lusitania, he had already sunk 3 other British vessels. The Lusitania's voyage was, for the most part, uneventful. Captain William Thomas Turner, a veteran Cunard Commodore, followed a routine course. However, he was operating under a set of conflicting and ultimately fatal instructions from the British Admiralty. He was advised to avoid headlands, steer a mid-channel course and maintain high speed. Yet, due to a need to conserve coal for the final dash into the port of Liverpool and the presence of fog banks, the ship was not operating at its maximum speed. On the morning of May 7th, 1915, the Lusitania entered the war zone. The weather had cleared and the Irish coast was visible in the distance. Captain Turner, concerned about navigating the fog, had reduced the ship's speed to around 18 knots, a pace that made her a much more manageable target for a submarine. Furthermore, instead of zigzagging, a standard evasive maneuver to foil submarine attacks, he was maintaining a steady, predictable course, making it easier for a U-boat commander to calculate an intercept solution. Aboard the U-20, Kapitänleutnant Schwieger was nearing the end of his patrol and was low on fuel and torpedoes. He had only 1 torpedo left of his best type. Just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, his watch officer spotted a large vessel on the horizon. Through his periscope, Schwieger identified the ship by its 4 funnels. It was the Lusitania. By a remarkable stroke of luck for the submarine commander, the massive ocean liner was steaming directly towards him, on a course that would allow for a perfect firing position. He didn't have to chase her. She was coming to him. Schwieger maneuvered his U-boat into position. The Lusitania, in a final fatal decision, made a turn to starboard to line up for an approach to Queenstown, now Cove Island. This turn presented the U-boat with an almost ideal target, the ship's broadside. At 2:10 in the afternoon, from a range of just over 700 yards, Schwieger gave the order to fire. A single G-type torpedo carrying a 350-pound warhead of hexanite sped silently through the water towards the unsuspecting liner. On the decks of the Lusitania, passengers were finishing their lunch. The mood was relaxed. They were in sight of land and believed the most dangerous part of their journey was over. A lookout spotted the white streak of the torpedo's wake, but it was too late. There was no time for any evasive action. The torpedo struck the mighty ship on her starboard side just after the Baltic Sea, a vast cold expanse cradled by northern Europe. For centuries, its waters have been a vital artery of commerce and connection. On September 27, 1994, the MS Estonia, a grand car and passenger ferry, set out from Tallinn to Stockholm, a routine voyage for nearly 1,000 souls. The ship was a symbol of modernity, a floating microcosm of society. But the Baltic is a realm of sudden change. That night, a fierce storm struck. Waves battered the vessel, testing every seam and rivet. Deep within the bow visor, a critical barrier was under immense stress. Suddenly it failed. The sea poured in, flooding the car deck. The ship listed violently. Chaos erupted as water rushed in, and the MS Estonia capsized within minutes. A desperate rescue began, but for most it was too late. The Baltic had claimed its sudden grave. In late 1948, China was torn apart by civil war. Millions fled the chaos, seeking safety in the south. Shanghai became a beacon for refugees escaping the violence. The SS Qiangya, an aging passenger steamer, was packed far beyond its capacity as desperate families boarded, hoping for escape. On December 3rd, over 3,000 people crowded aboard, filling every space. As dusk fell, the Qiangya steamed down the Huangpu River, heading for the East China Sea. The river's mouth was treacherous, littered with naval mines from the war. At 9:30 p.m., a massive explosion tore through the ship's stern, likely a mine. Darkness and panic swept the decks as the overloaded ship began to sink. The Qiangya settled in shallow water, its wreckage visible above the surface. Survivors clung to the wreck in the freezing night, waiting for help that came too late for thousands. The morning of June 15, 1904, dawned bright and clear over New York City. It was a perfect early summer day filled with promise and sunshine. For the community of St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church in the heart of Manhattan's Little Germany, or Kleindeutschland, it was a day of great anticipation. This was the date of their 17th annual excursion, a cherished tradition. It was a day to escape the heat and grime of the city's tenements, a day of picnics, games, and fellowship. Over 1,300 people, mostly women and children from the German-American parish, gathered at the 3rd Street Pier on the East River, their faces alight with excitement. Their vessel for the day was the paddle steamer SS General Slocum, a grand triple-decked wooden ship. She had been a fixture on New York's waterways for over a decade, a familiar and seemingly reliable craft for day excursions. With her tall smokestacks and churning paddle wheels, she was a proud symbol of the era's steam-powered transport. As the passengers boarded, dressed in their Sunday best, the atmosphere was one of joy and festivity. A band played cheerful tunes, and children darted about the decks, their laughter echoing across the water. It was a scene of idyllic turn-of-the-century community life. The destination was Locust Grove on Long Island Sound, a popular picnic spot. The journey itself was part of the pleasure, a chance to feel the cool river breeze and watch the familiar skyline of Manhattan recede into the distance. The General Slocum, under the command of Captain William Van Schaik, pulled away from the pier shortly after 9:30 in the morning and began its journey up the East River. The river was busy, a bustling highway of ferries, tugboats and barges, the lifeblood of the city's commerce. For the passengers of the Slocum, it was simply a picturesque backdrop to their happy day out. But beneath the festive veneer of music and laughter, a fatal complacency had taken root. The SS General Slocum was a ship riddled with hidden, deadly flaws. Its safety equipment, mandated by law, was in a state of shocking neglect. The fire hoses were rotten, stiffened with age and paint, and would crumble under pressure. The life preservers, filled with cheap granulated cork, had lost their buoyancy over years of exposure and were now little more than dead weights. The lifeboats were wired and glued to the deck, impossible to launch in an emergency. The ship was a floating tragedy waiting to happen. As the General Slocum steamed northward, passing what is now Roosevelt Island, a small but fatal event occurred unnoticed in a forward storage cabin. Known as the lamp room, this compartment was used to store oil, lamps, and other flammable materials. It is believed that a carelessly discarded match or cigarette ignited a barrel of straw, a tiny spark in a room filled with fuel. At first, it was just a wisp of smoke, a faint, acrid smell that began to seep out from behind the locked door. A small fire, if discovered early, could have been easily extinguished. But on this ship, on this day, it was not to be. The fire was first noticed by a deckhand around 10 o'clock in the morning, but crucial minutes were wasted. Instead of raising a general alarm immediately, the crew attempted to fight the blaze themselves, a futile effort with their decrepit equipment. The fire, fed by the flammable liquids and dry wood of the ship's structure, grew with astonishing speed. It quickly became an Lake Victoria, Africa's largest lake, has long been a lifeline for millions, its ferries vital arteries of connection. Among them was the MV Bukoba, a familiar vessel plying the route between Bukoba and Mwanza. Built in 1979, the Bukoba was a roll-on, roll-off ferry designed for 430 passengers and 850 tons of cargo. But in reality, it often carried far more. On May 21, 1996, the Bukoba left port packed with people and goods. No one knew this routine journey would end in tragedy. Near Mwanza, a sudden turn, overloaded decks and unsecured cargo proved catastrophic. The ferry capsized within minutes, trapping hundreds inside. Local fishermen rushed to help, but the scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Between 800 and 1,000 lives were lost, making the MV Bukoba one of Africa's worst maritime disasters. Only 114 survived, and the tragedy remains a haunting memory on Lake Victoria. In the summer of 1915, Chicago was alive with energy and promise. For the employees of Western Electric, July 24th was a day of celebration, a company picnic with thousands boarding steamships for a day on Lake Michigan. The SS Eastland, sleek but dangerously top-heavy, was among the ships waiting at the Clark Street Bridge. As families in their Sunday best boarded, the festive mood masked a hidden danger. The Eastland's design flaws, narrow beam, shallow draft, and recent heavy modifications made it prone to listing. As more passengers crowded aboard, the ship began to tilt. Suddenly, the Eastland rolled onto its side in the Chicago River just feet from the dock, Hundreds were thrown into the murky water. Many more were trapped below deck. The disaster unfolded before stunned onlookers as rescuers rushed to help. In minutes, over 800 lives were lost. Chicago's greatest single tragedy caused not by storm, but by human error and design. The SS Eastland disaster remains a haunting lesson in the cost of overlooked warnings and flawed engineering. Our journey through these 10 harrowing sea disasters, from the icy North Atlantic to the placid waters of a Chicago river, reveals a series of profound and often repeated lessons. The stories of the Titanic, the Donna Paz, the Eastland and all the others are not merely tales of tragedy. They are stark warnings written in wreckage and loss that speak to us across the decades. They reveal the catastrophic consequences of human error, of hubris, of negligence, and of a persistent failure to respect the immense and unforgiving power of the water. Each disaster, in its own unique and terrible way, underscores a fundamental truth. Safety at sea is not a matter of chance, but a chain of responsibility where every link is vital. These events have been the painful catalysts for change, their legacies measured in the litany of regulations and international conventions that now govern maritime travel. The sinking of the Titanic gave birth to the SOLAS Convention, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, creating a global framework for everything from lifeboat capacity to 24-hour radio watches. The fires aboard the General Slocum and Donna Paz led to stricter fire safety standards and materials. The capsizing of the Estonia and the Eastland forced a deeper understanding of vessel stability and structural integrity. The progress we have made in maritime safety has been paid for in large part by the lives lost in these very disasters. Yet, for all our technological advancements and regulatory frameworks, the sea remains a domain of profound power and unpredictability. It is an environment that commands respect, one that can expose any weakness in our designs, any flaw in our judgment with ruthless efficiency. These stories encourage us to reflect on our relationship with the world's great bodies of water. They are not simply surfaces to be crossed, but complex, dynamic systems. They are sources of life, commerce, and connection, but they hold a latent power that we underestimate at our peril. These disasters are a humbling reminder of our place within the natural world, not as masters, but as participants who must proceed with caution, wisdom, and humility. As we conclude our journey, we are left with the echoes of these events and the memory of the thousands of lives they claimed. Their stories are a vital part of our collective maritime heritage, a chronicle of loss that must never be forgotten. We invite you to share your own thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Perhaps you have a family connection to one of these events or a story of the sea that has stayed with you. By sharing and remembering, we honor the victims and reaffirm our commitment to heeding the hard-won lessons from the deep, ensuring that future generations may travel the world's waters with ever greater safety.